Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm also changed my slides, my topic a little bit today. After seeing most of the talk yesterday and this morning, I think I would rather want to share my experience from the pharma or from biotech industry point of view about how to run how to plan for clinical study in Asia and Southeast Asia. And I think that will be tied to later on our panel discussions regarding about the mapping your challenges and opportunities. So the content, I'm going to talk about the drivers and the barriers of conducting clinical studies globally. We did have studies that are running globally, including Asia, and most of them are all pivotal studies. Then I'm talking about a little bit about the regulatory hurdles that you're going to hear my challenges and how I'm going to overcome. And then some of the way how I'm going to deal with the study management, particularly the quality of the data that many of the agency concern. Is this true? Is this a myth, or is this just a perception? Then I'm going to talk about, lastly, I know this organization trying to promote studies into the Southeast Asia and Asia, and I'm going to talk about the ethical concerns and give you a couple of the cases and let you guys think about are we on the right track or not. So the background, you can see in 2004, it was been predicted that there will be at least 30% of the clinical studies will be done outside of the US and Western Europe. And the prediction actually, we say by 2014, it's actually going to double. And what is interesting, you're going to find in 2010 already, approximately 80% of the NDA and the BLA submissions already have contained data outside of the US and Western Europe. Here are some of the numbers you can see that out of that 121 submission, including the combination of the NDA and the BLA submission, you can see only approximately 20% of that is contained only US data, but the rest of them are not. And surprisingly, that you're going to see at least 60–70% of them are actually coming out from Asia, and they contain data outside the US. So what are some of the drivers? I've been hearing over and over again that cost reduction, and I can tell you that's true. 50–80% of that of the US cost is indeed, it's cheaper when you run it outside of the US, particularly in Southeast Asia. But later on, I'm going to talk to you about some of the quality measurement that I put in, and it actually wash out the cost of how much you're going to run in the US based studies. So I'm sorry to disappoint some of the people here, but I think the quality measurement is quite important to protect the image of running clinical study in Asia. However, I do believe that it does have a shorter development timeline, and that does help because many of the country, I mean, they do have the patient assessments here, and you can meet our target goal for enrollment. Now, some of the country and even some of the top site centers indeed give us a much more better data quality. And later on, I can actually show you some of the data too, that in some of the countries, by the FDA audit, indeed are actually better than some of the sites in the US and in Western Europe. And then, of course, it's an enhance of evidence-based medicine, particularly in this part of the world, as well as potentially globalize a product with the simultaneous drug registration. This is a picture I took in South Africa, and I think this is quite nicely to tie together of globalization. What can a country do if we can actually provide some of the product from Western world? So what are some of the barriers then? Definitely, top topic is always about the uncertainty of the regulatory approval process. Each country have different way. I think I don't need to talk more about it. Today, this morning, we have talked a lot about China, Taiwan, Korea, and of course, Indonesia too. But every country have different way, and I'm going to explain later on how we're going to overcome, or how I overcame some of the challenges. But more importantly is this GCP. Is this part of the world have really good standard of GCP that actually the FDA and EMA will recognize this, and then also the documentation and monitoring. How are we going to overcome some of those challenges, in particular Southeast Asia, that when you're talking to a company globally, sitting in US and in Europe, when they talk about China, Hong Kong, Singapore, this is a black hole for them. So do they really think that this is bad, or they just don't know the unknowns? And then I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to talk about it because I think that for example, in India, have a very good already protection of intellectual property, and Singapore as well. And then right now, and China is still trying to figure that out. But then later on, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about some ethical concerns. So regulatory strategy, my view is always to leverage with the health authorities. And how are you going to do that? And that's always a way. And I heard that yesterday someone actually asked, well, some of the authority will not give us a very formal consultation. You can do informal consultation. You can call them, but actually you can ask them to leverage that with your KOLs, that if you have a local affiliates that already have established. If not, later on I'm going to talk about using a CRO, a well-established CRO, that can actually, you can deal with that. My recommendation is consultation is before you start with your late phase 2, and then when you complete your phase 2, you're going to do another consultation, and hopefully you have another one when you start with your phase 3. I have done many of those, I call informal consultation. So basically in a hallway, catch them in the 20 to 30 minutes. We did ask them to meet with us, and we actually provide minutes after the meeting. They will not give you a minute because they will not do that, but you can provide to them and say, here's what we agreed. Submission requirement, I always ask them, is there any fast track? I'm having an often designated drugs. Any way can tell me what is the fastest way to do it. This is the unmet need for your population. So sometimes they will actually lay out that by looking at the whole entire program, if you've been transparent to them, they will tell you that, okay, based on this, you can go this and this route. See, again, even though they have some established health regulatory system, in my point of view, everything is negotiable in this part of the world if you do have a good relationship. Again, if it's a sequential submission, basically you have to get the health authority approval, then the EC approval. I'm going to explain to you in a minute. Then how are you going to go around this? Because all of a sudden, your submission or approval become double. Then, of course, is to set expectation. And as of like almost 2010, even the FDA and the EMA will accept up to 20% of the population from the study from the population from this part of the world. So I'm not sure that will be the trend anymore, because I actually have started with negotiating with at least 33%, but then it's also depending on some of your indication too. I have actually done a couple of the study, only have maybe 20% from the US, and basically because it's very difficult to find patients, and the FDA expect that, and they agree that, okay, fine, go to the other part of the world, but please meet the GCP requirements. And so I think people, again, need to really sit down with the agency to talk about expectation, and then if you're going to include this part of the world, will they accept the data when you file for your registration? Parallel approval, and I think this is very, very simple. Obviously, you have to get the health authority approval. You can also submit to the EC review for approval. And most of the sites will require that once you get the approval, you can start your contract and budget negotiation and approval. So in this part of the world, I would say average is between 3 to 5 months from the submission all the way to get your approval for your first patient in. Sequential this is off scale because otherwise I'm going to go out somewhere. But health authority, and then you can get the ethics committee approval. Then you can start with the contract and budget review. This could take you 5-6 months, even longer than that. And for China, even worse. This part is unknown. It could be 5 months all the way to 12 months to 15 months. But again, we have experience that we can actually shorten this part to be much doable. So what I would recommend, and again is based on the experience, is using a sequential approach with a twist. What we did is submitted. We asked for health authority approval, so we submitted as well. Then we leverage, again, I keep saying leveraging with the relationship with the KOLs. Have the KOLs go into the ethics committee with me to discuss about the ethics committee, and then they will not sign anything. They will review. They say, fine, we will review it, but we will put you a contingency. We will not approve at the end. We can also start with the contract, with the site, with the KOL, the help. So what happened in this part, and I'm going to tell you, this is all happening within one day. We got the EC review without signature, and based on contingency with the health authority approval letter. This is again leveraged with the local affiliate, if you have one, and the KOL relationship. We actually got the approval on the day. We also asked the ethics committee to sign on the same day. And on the same day, we actually signed off also the contract. And then we also started with the SIV also on the same day. So everything what I'm trying to say is you need to plan ahead how you want to do this statistically with your partner, basically with your KOL. And I just find out that one of the study we actually from the SIV from the first patient in was 21 days. And this part was actually approximately 3 months. So instead of a long stretch to 8-9 months, all of a sudden I can actually start my study within 3 months. And which at that time some of my site wasn't prepared because we expect to be 9 months approval. I think the most important is finding the unknowns. The unknowns I want to put it up front is most important is to do your feasibility, understanding the clinical operation, the medical and regulatory issues. And so by that, we also want to talk about GCP training and compliance. How are we going to do that? Are they really up to the speeds? Is some of the site even the peers talking about having GCP training in their own country? Will the FDA agree with that? If not, what are you going to plan to do? And I'm going to touch that in a little bit later. Is there any racial and dietary difference? You have to take a look at that because when we do a global study, FDA may not want that. FDA will say, if that's the case, please document all the dietary information into your case report form. Site resources. All the centers are really excited to do a global study. Do they have the infrastructure to do the study? Do they have the resource to do the studies? And then even if they can do it, then do they really understand the compliance of running a GCP, running a global study rather than just a regional study? And what are their healthcare standards? Are they quite different to the Western world? Then again, utilizing the local affiliate, if not using the CRO, the experience and the relationship. And then you can use that to leverage earlier what I mentioned to get the clarity with the regulatory process and the submission timeline, any shortcuts, and then build the investigator and the site relationships. Again, you can actually go faster with your contract and the budget at certain sites. Some of the sites are really overloaded because all the big companies want to go there. Maybe you want to look for other sites that are less popular. So bridging the gap, what can we do? We use CRO, outsourcing most of them, but then the question is always, do you want to do using a global CRO or local CRO? Which one do you want to? But regardless of using global or local, I think the important is the knowledge. Do they have the knowledge of this regulatory landscape from those countries? And then are they able to deliver the risk mitigation plan for me? If that's not working, what are their solutions? Because they are supposed to be the experts. And then what are the capability of training the investigator and the site? Are they using, I mean, yesterday somebody from ICON, I believe, talked about Firecrest. I use that too. If Firecrest will be the one, and then also, are they really a true partner, and they're going to take some of the risk from us as well? And then when we talk about that too, is the knowledge of the sample shipping, and this is very difficult. I mean, shipping in and out to China, to Indonesia, what does the CRO know about how to deal with this? Implementing the GCP trainings, I have to say that over and over again, that is important. FDA do look at that. I use ongoing trainings using Firecrest, also refreshers. I do that in the investigator meeting. Also, we also input also the, in the middle of the study, we do another training, face-to-face. We also have certificate that print out to put it in the binder, so when they have an auditor comes in, this is the GCP that was recommended by the FDA. Obviously, we will have protocol-specific training, and we also, at the start of the study, but we also put all the training and material into the Firecrest as well, using that so that the sites, when they're overloaded, they can go back to the website and to refresh themselves. Thus, the CRO, whether global, local, do they have SOP that meet the standard? What are the quality system do they have? And the bottom line for that is, when you do a global study that require FDA and EMA approval, they will ask you, if you're going to do a study and you're using global CRO and also local CRO, the first question when I did audit and they asked me, which SOP are they going to use from the site level when you run the study? So obviously they are looking is a global SOPs. So the other way to do, of course, is to have the local CRO to be trained all the global SOPs from the other company. But I don't think that is always true and it's easy to implement into it. Global site management, this is what I'm going to talk about in a minute too, is co-monitored by sponsors. Some of the companies started again using co-monitoring, going to monitoring the CRA from the CRO, but that's a huge resource cost because it's expensive. But again, do we have to do it for all the studies, or do you only looking for only the pivotal studies and only implement into those that you're planning to registration for a global study? So I'm going to show you some of the results as well for the global monitoring for all my pivotal registrational study. So one of the things you have to remember is if it's not documented, then it does not count. So it's interesting, this is actually an audit, but it's not from the FDA. And the finding you can see from domestic, which is only in the Asia Pacific, and then your foreign is mixed together, and you can see it's not much of a difference. The trend I'm still seeing is the main one are not action indicated, which means that you don't understand what is going on. The PI did not sign some certain things. Protocol deviation is a huge one, followed by records, again, documentation. And if FDA come in, I believe this will be huge. Consents and then adverse events, and surprisingly, adverse events are pretty well documented and have a good process in the in Asia. So the main finding most of the time is the PI oversight, and as well as CRO oversight. And inadequate ICF process is always the big concern from the FDA point of view. So how about implementing the co-monitoring? So as I said, FDA can decide to perform an audit anytime during the study. And this is from the FDA audit, and this is 32 studies that globally done, and this is the finding mostly, and this is included Asia. The big finding problem from the FDA is actually the protocol violation and deviation. And then followed by, again, documentation. As you can see, I keep mentioning this. And then consents, the FDA think that it's not good enough. For how do you make sure that the patient actually really understands the the risk and benefit of the study, and we are not buying the patients. And this is very difficult to answer to the FDA, because we say that it's been already discussed with the patient, they signed it, but to the FDA point of view, this is not good enough. False data is interesting that came up and not into the other slide. So, and subject safety is still, as I consider, quite low. Consider that the perception that this part of the world is not running nicely, but I think this is fair that it's only less than 4%, I think. So how do you keep yourself above the water? As I mentioned, co-monitoring. So how did I do this? For every 4 or 5 periodic monitoring visits by the CRA, I actually have my CRA co-monitor to go and do the visit. They do all the site initiation visit. They will be accompanied with the CRA, and they also do all the site closeout visits together with the CRAs. We also do 100% source verification instead of most of them are doing it 60 to 80%. The good things about using the co-monitors or my CRA from the sponsor point of view is to build a relationship. Again, the relationship is important. It's not only running the study, but what happens is the study finished. How are you going to launch your product? Again, from my sponsor point of view, I want to have somebody from my company already build a relationship with the KOL and the site. Some of the results that we found, that we actually reduced the number of queries by over 80%. The aging of the queries actually also decreased by 90% because we have so many visits to the site. It's interesting, including Asia, this is including India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, I have no critical findings of all. Yes, we also have major findings, but it's decreased. I do not see any significant difference between US, Western country, and Asia Pacific, including the Southeast Asia. So, to my point of view, I think this is a myth because of the unknown of this part of the world, that the Western company will think that this is actually not compliance. Electronic data is actually saved me a lot of time. I use a lot because I think that it's less cumbersome. It gives me a real-time checking that I can go back and check what happened to the site. And then when this part of the world is sleeping, I'm actually checking you guys. And by the time you wake up, you can see a list of queries from my CRAs and telling you what's wrong. It actually helps reduce errors because you will click and you will not let you enter if it's wrong. But here's the problem. What are the privacy regulation in this part of the world? And it's difficult. It's actually not as strict as in the FDA point of view. So in my mind, I always apply the most strictest law. Internet access is another problem because not all the hospital will give you an internet. So how did I bypass it? I give them a broadband card so that they can use. I do a lot of trainings because many of them are very intimidated with using the electronic data capture system. So we did training again, and we also posted onto the Firecrest to make sure that they understand and also get the certificate. So I'm going to switch that to the ethic concern. So that's a study. This is a study, actually a randomized placebo-controlled study with a short course of ACT treatment to prevent perinatal transmission of the HIV. And this is done by the CDC, the NIH, and mainly in Africa and in Thailand. And what's interesting that you're going to find is that this intensive ACT treatment actually has already been proven to be effective. So therefore, most of the developed countries will not even want to be in the study. And then for this study, they actually shown the 51% reduction of the perinatal HIV transmission. That sounds wonderful, but what happened is that the standard of care for the HIV was not offered for any of these pregnant women. So what happened was that you're leaving a bunch of kids like this with the HIV. So is it what we're supposed to do is because we want to meet a certain kind of enrollment target in order to come into this part of the world. Another example, and I don't want to mention names here, but again, it's doing a study using an antibiotic, and interestingly, this test drugs was actually have more problem, and the problem is that later on you're going to see in the Washington Post is about the informed consent process was not adequate, and they do have a FDA approved drugs. So why this company come all the way to Africa and to do a study? Now, about 200 children was tested with this drug, and then 11 subjects was died, and then over 12 of the subjects were left either blind, deaf, or paralyzed. And what find out is in the informed consent was not adequate to explain this risk. And the worst part is they did not advise the subject there was a FDA approved a product, and they will not offer. So what happened? Patient blind. So I guess I'm going to leave this at the end of this talk to ask, is it appropriate to apply the same ethical standard of the procedure from the developed world like the Europe and USA to run a study in here in this part of the world? And what happened is that, does the sponsor really have an intention of making this drug market into this world? And if it's not, why are we actually coming into this part of the world and to run studies?